Where do we go when we sleep? What are dreams but echoes of trauma that we register beneath the black stillness of nothing? We are nothing. Sinister Narratives presents.
Why does the Scarecrow smell like blood? The wind howled through the fields, carrying with it the scent of impending rain and the chill of the coming night. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare, the setting sun casting long shadows across the desolate landscape, where rows of crops stretched toward the horizon like an army of silent sentinels. And among them stood the Scarecrow. I had heard the legends, the whispers that passed through the town like a dark secret. They spoke of a scarecrow that defied the natural order, a creature of the night that hungered for more than just crows and rodents. They said it feasted on human hearts and drank human souls, a relentless predator lurking amidst the crops. As a child, I had laughed at such tales, dismissing them as the fanciful imaginings of superstitious minds. But now, as I stood alone in the fading light, staring at the scarecrow that loomed before me, the laughter died in my throat. The stories had taken on a new, chilling significance. Its form was grotesque, yet eerily human, a ragged figure fashioned from old clothes and burlap, its head a crude mockery of a face stitched together with crude threads. But it was the eyes that held me captive, two empty sockets that seemed to bore into my very soul. There was malevolence in its stance, a promise of something far more sinister than a simple guardian of the crops. The rain began to fall, a cold drizzle that soaked through my clothes and sent shivers down my spine. But I couldn't tear my gaze away from the Scarecrow. It was as though an invisible force held me captive, as though I was being drawn toward it against my will. With each step I took, the air grew heavy with an unnatural stillness, the sound of raindrops hitting the ground fading into a distant whisper. The Scarecrow's empty eyes seemed to follow me, its burlap grin widening into a macabre smile. And then, in a voice that echoed through the very fabric of reality, it spoke. "Come closer, child," it whispered, the words sending a shiver down my spine. "I hunger for the essence that courses through your veins." My heart raced, and yet I couldn't resist its command. I moved closer, the raindrops falling around me like tears from the heavens. The Scarecrow's hand, an abomination of straw and twine, reached out toward me, its touch sending a jolt of icy dread through my body. And then, with a speed that defied its form, it plunged its hand into my chest, its fingers closing around my beating heart. The pain was excruciating, a searing agony that threatened to consume me. I could feel my life force being drained away, my essence pulsating through the Scarecrow's fingers like a dark elixir. As the last remnants of consciousness slipped away, I felt a sensation unlike any other, a feeling of emptiness, of being hollowed out from within. It was as though my very soul was being devoured, my identity fading into nothingness. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the pain ceased. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, my body weak and trembling. The Scarecrow stood over me, its form now more solid, more tangible than before. It seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, its eyes burning with an infernal light. "Thank you, child," it murmured, its voice a cacophony of whispers that filled my mind. "Your essence sustains me. Your soul enriches me." As the rain intensified, washing away the traces of the ordeal, I realized that I had become a part of the Scarecrow's grisly legend. I had fallen victim to the insatiable hunger that lurked within its straw-stitched form. My heart had been devoured, my soul consumed, all in the name of satisfying its unholy appetite. The night grew darker, the rain pounding against the earth like a mournful dirge. And as I lay there, broken and drained, I couldn't help but wonder how many others had fallen victim to the Scarecrow's insidious hunger. How many lives had been extinguished, how many souls had been swallowed by the darkness that dwelled within its burlap form. As the last vestiges of my strength faded away, I felt a chilling presence at my side, the Scarecrow, its gaze fixed upon me, its eyes gleaming with an insatiable craving. And in that final moment, as the world around me faded into oblivion, I knew that I was destined to join the countless souls that had become sustenance for the creature that haunted the fields. The rain continued to fall, washing away the evidence of my demise as the Scarecrow stood vigil over its unholy domain. And in the depths of that cold, relentless night, the legend lived on, a tale of horror and hunger that would be whispered by generations to come, a cautionary tale of the darkness that can lie dormant in even the most innocent of forms. The cornfield stretched out before me, its rustling stalks swaying in the breeze. It was a place of both nostalgia and dread, a place that held memories of innocent games and childhood laughter, but also of the chilling encounter that had forever scarred my soul. I had returned to the scene of my ordeal, drawn by an inexplicable compulsion to confront the horrors that had haunted me for so long. Years had passed since that fateful night, but the terror had never truly left me. The memory of the Scarecrow's malevolent grin, its burlap form looming over me, still haunted my nightmares. And now, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cornfield, I felt its presence once again, a darkness that had taken root among the rows of crops. I had heard the whispers, the rumors that circulated through the town like a festering disease. Children had gone missing, their laughter replaced by an eerie silence. The Scarecrow, it seemed, had not been content with the feast it had made of my heart and soul. It hungered still, its appetite insatiable, and now it stalked the innocent a predator that reveled in the torment of the young. As the moon rose, casting an otherworldly glow over the cornfield, I ventured deeper into the maze of stalks. The air grew thick with an oppressive tension, as though the very earth itself held its breath in anticipation. I could hear the whispers, faint, distant voices that seemed to emanate from the rustling leaves. It was as though the cornfield itself was alive, a sentient entity that pulsed with a sinister energy. The Scarecrow stood before me, its form bathed in moonlight, its burlap face contorted into a grotesque grin. It seemed more alive than ever, its eyes gleaming with an unholy light. It had evolved, its hunger growing with each victim it claimed. It was no longer content with mere sustenance. It sought to revel in the fear and despair of its prey. And then I saw them, the children. They appeared like specters, their small forms darting through the rows of corn, their laughter a haunting echo in the night. They were innocent, unaware of the malevolent force that hunted them. They were drawn to the cornfield, as though an unseen hand guided them toward their doom. The Scarecrow moved with an otherworldly grace, its form twisting and contorting as though it defied the laws of physics. It was no longer bound by the constraints of the physical world. It had become something more, something that transcended reality itself. And as it drew closer to the children, its presence seemed to engulf them, its burlap hands reaching out with an almost caressing touch. I watched in helpless horror as the Scarecrow's fingers closed around one of the children's wrists. The child froze, her laughter replaced by a terrified whimper. The Scarecrow's grip tightened, its fingers sinking into her flesh, as though it was drawing sustenance from her very essence. Her eyes widened with terror, her voice a strangled scream that echoed through the night. The other children watched in terror, their faces pale as they realized the true nature of the creature that had ensnared their friend. They were trapped, caught in a nightmarish game of cat and mouse. The Scarecrow's hunger knew no bounds, and it reveled in the agony of its victims. I wanted to flee, to escape the horrors that played out before me, but I was paralyzed, both by fear and by a twisted fascination. The Scarecrow's presence seemed to seep into my very bones, as though its malevolence was infecting my soul. I was both witness and accomplice, trapped in a cycle of terror that defied reason. And then, in an instant, it was over. The Scarecrow released its grip, its fingers slipping away from the child's wrist. She collapsed to the ground, her body trembling with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. The Scarecrow stood over her, its burlap form a silent testament to the horrors it had wrought. The other children remained frozen in place, their eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fascination. They had witnessed the Scarecrow's insatiable hunger, its ability to ensnare and torment its prey. The cornfield had become a graveyard of innocence, a place where the lines between reality and nightmare had blurred beyond recognition. As the moon shone down upon the scene, I realized that the terror had not abated, it had only evolved. The Scarecrow was no longer content with being a mere legend, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. It had become a tangible force of darkness, a creature that reveled in the pain and despair it inflicted upon its victims. I turned away, unable to bear the weight of the horrors that had unfolded before me. The children's laughter had been silenced, replaced by the haunting echoes of their fear. The cornfield, once a place of innocent games, had become a prison of nightmares, a domain ruled by a malevolent force beyond comprehension. And as I stumbled away from the scene, my heart heavy with the weight of the tragedy I had witnessed, I knew that the Scarecrow's reign of terror would continue. It hungered for more than just hearts and souls. It hungered for the very essence of humanity, for the fear and despair that lay dormant within us all. And as long as it stalked the cornfield, the innocent would remain at its mercy, trapped in a nightmare that had no end. The memory of the Scarecrow's insatiable hunger had never left me, its malevolent presence haunting my every thought. The fields that had once been a source of comfort now held only dread, a reminder of the horrors that lurked beneath the surface. But I could no longer ignore the darkness that had taken root. I had to confront the nightmare that had become my reality. The town had changed since the Scarecrow's reign of terror had begun. Fear had settled over the community like a suffocating fog, its tendrils weaving through every interaction, every whispered conversation. The legend had evolved into a nightmare that transcended generations, a reality that no one could deny. It was a chill autumn night when I returned to the cornfield, the moon casting an eerie glow over the rows of crops. I carried with me a torch, a beacon of fire to combat the darkness that had taken root. I had heard whispers of a way to vanquish the Scarecrow, a ritual passed down through generations, a ritual that involved fire and sacrifice. As I ventured deeper into the cornfield, the rustling leaves seemed to whisper their secrets to the wind. The air was heavy with a sense of foreboding, as though the very earth itself held its breath in anticipation. And there, amidst the stalks, stood the Scarecrow, a burlap form bathed in moonlight, its eyes gleaming with an unholy light. I could feel its malevolence, its hunger, its desire to torment and consume. But I was no longer a helpless victim. I was armed with fire and a resolve that burned hotter than any flame. With a determined step, I approached the Scarecrow, the torch held high. "Your reign of terror ends here," I declared, my voice a defiant challenge to the darkness that had taken root. The Scarecrow's burlap grin widened, its laughter a chilling echo that seemed to reverberate through the very air. It was a mocking gesture, a reminder that it was no mere creature of flesh and bone. But I was undeterred. I had come prepared to face the horrors that lurked within the Scarecrow's form. With a determined thrust, I plunged the torch into the Scarecrow's body, the flames licking at its straw-stuffed form. It shrieked, a sound that echoed through the night, a cacophony of pain and rage. But I held fast, the fire consuming its burlap exterior, its malevolence yielding to the searing heat. As the flames engulfed the Scarecrow, its form began to wither and crumble, its once imposing presence reduced to nothing more than a smoldering heap. And then, with a final burst of flames, it was gone, a wisp of smoke carried away by the wind. But the nightmare was far from over. As the last embers of the Scarecrow's form faded into the night, a flock of ravens descended upon the cornfield. They cawed and circled, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intelligence. It was as though the Scarecrow's malevolence had been reborn within them, its hunger transferred to their dark souls. The ravens swept down upon the cornfield, their caws a haunting chorus that sent shivers down my spine. They moved with a precision that defied nature, their movements orchestrated by an unseen force. And then, in a gruesome display of their newfound power, they began to feast upon the eyes of those who had ventured into the cornfield. City slickers, drawn by morbid curiosity, had become unwitting victims in the ravens' deadly game. Their screams echoed through the night, their voices a symphony of agony and terror. The ravens tore into their victims with a frenzy that seemed fueled by the very essence of the Scarecrow itself. I watched in horror as the ravens fed, their eyes locked onto mine as though they could see into the depths of my soul. They were no longer mere birds. They were vessels of darkness, carriers of a malevolent force that defied explanation. And as the night wore on, the cornfield became a graveyard of broken bodies, a testament to the terror that had been unleashed.